day. They're not in as big a hurry to rush off to their corporation and, what's that Jim Morrison saying? Turn in your hours for a handful of dimes, right? I mean, we're literally trading our time for less and less enjoyment, and more of that money that comes from us investing our time in their system goes to a petroleum company who's making record profits in a time where there are people in this country homeless, people starving, people without health care, you have first responders and veterans being disenfranchised. There's some serious things going on in this country, and you will never, ever, from today all the way into the past, if you look at all the TV footage, you will never see these things truly being represented, because if any of the candidates came out and said, well, here's how you end the war, or here's how you do this, or here's how you do that, like a Jesse Ventura character who might be able to speak a little bit more truth to power, right?
I don't watch much TV, but I do something else. I read books. And last year I read 16 books. Now, certainly not all of them on 9/11, but I love to read history books. I don't read fiction because I have my own imagination, and I don't need some writer to try to take my own imagination from me. So I like to read history and what I consider somewhat factual books. And, then I started, my son kept on my case about going to the internet and watching this loosechange.com. And so when my wife and I returned one Sunday, we decided to watch it. It takes about an hour. And I went through every emotion when I watched this. I went through anger, I went through fear, I went through crying, I went through almost getting sick to my stomach, and I started thinking back to 9/11, and my questions are simple. How can two planes knock down 3 buildings?
Right? Because his demographic is Navy SEALs and pro wrestling fans, and a lot of the groups of people who think that they already know what's going on. So coming back to my story, how did I find out that what I thought I knew wasn't in agreement with reality? Well, like anything else, it starts with just a little thing, and in that little thing I could have ignored it, or in my case I paid attention to it, and that little thing was my paycheck, and the numbers on the account statement weren't adding up to the numbers that I thought I was supposed to be paid. So I asked some questions, and I didn't get satisfactory answers. And then I sent an email to my team asking them, because it concerns how they're being paid. And the next day I'm fired. And at the time I didn't know why I was fired. I didn't know some of these things, but later in getting the documentation and looking at what I wrote and looking at what I had attached, it had all the names of the people that were working on the project at Marsh, all their hours, and it was basically proof that the company I was working for was defrauding Marsh. And then the other part of it was the fact that Marsh wasn't interested that my company was defrauding them. So when I was still working for Silverstream, you have funny business going on within our own ranks, which happens at a software sales company, because during the dot-com boom, it was very much like a Wild West. Anything goes atmosphere. I mean, there were several companies that got busted for fake accounting, and basically when you're dealing in software, you're printing your own money, and you can name the value of it, right? So I could print a CD with the software code and sell it to this client for 1,000 or this client for 10 million, and they're getting the same thing. So anytime that you have something where there's no value assigned and it's all kind of subjective, that is a possible mechanism where you could launder large amounts of money. Now, I didn't realize any of this back then. All I knew is that I had a Porsche payment and a Range Rover payment and these other things coming up, and I wasn't being paid properly, and I wanted to maintain my status quo. Well, then, the next day when I got fired, I'd never been fired before, so I really didn't know how to react or what to do, and so I went home and I booked a vacation, and I probably had $100 grand in the bank at that point, and so I still wasn't even really waking up to what I was in the middle of, or even the fact that I was swimming with sharks. I just thought that some asshole wanted my commission and got rid of me so he could take it. Coming up through August of that year, what happens then is, out of the blue, my ex-employer comes and gives me, or offers me, to extend my health care benefits for 3 months and to pay me a sum of $9,999. Now, I had just gone through emergency surgery where I had to have an organ removed, and my health care was running out. Now, being in that situation, when somebody comes and offers to extend your health care and to give you some cash, you don't exactly like think about that critically. I was just like, okay. But then I did think about it critically. And I said, nobody gives you money for nothing. And even though I don't know what they don't want me to talk about at that point, I knew that something was rotten in Denmark. So in contacting people that I trusted at Marsh & McLennan and saying, look, I have a situation where I was terminated, and I think it has something to do with my questioning the billable hours, at Marsh and the project. And since you guys look like you're going to lose your jobs because of this whole project, is this something that you're interested in? So coming out of August of 2001, what you have is I'm still unemployed, but now I have this little side contract that they made me sign in order to get the health insurance. And I needed the health insurance because I was still in recovery when they offered that to me. I think it was August 21st of 2001. All right. From there, it's a simple phone call on Friday the 9th. I was having dinner at Windows in the World in the World Trade Center. I had a friend of mine who I'd worked with at a couple different jobs, and he was working with this new company. And that's usually how you get jobs. You got a buddy who works there, and you're qualified, and they're hiring people, so let's meet for dinner and see how it goes. Because I used to work in the World Trade Center, and these guys were from San Francisco, I thought, what a cool place to take them. Windows in the World, you can see the whole city. It's a great restaurant. So while I'm there that night, and these guys are saying basically that they want me to fly out to San Francisco that Thursday, and they're saying, we're going to offer you this job, I get a little excited, and I start thinking about, well, now that I have, a job lined up, it doesn't look like Silverstream's going to try to blackball me or anything like this, I'm going to go ahead and contact people at Marsh and kind of just give them the documents and see what they do with them. So I get up from the table, I make a telephone call from inside the World Trade Center, I leave a message for Norma Taddy, who is the Executive Administrative Assistant for Catherine Lee, who was the sponsor of Silverstream at Marsh. So she was the senior employee there, who had run the old Lotus Notes database system, which Silverstream was then taking that data and helping to migrate and make it available over the web. So I leave this message with Norma, expecting to get a call or a voicemail back saying, all right, so here's what you're supposed to do. And the next day, sorry, not the next day, it was Monday when I got a call back. So I left the message Friday. She, to my understanding, she came in, listened to the message, checked with whoever she needed to check with. She calls and leaves me a message back. Her instructions are to drop off the documents at the office between 9 and 9:30 the next day, which was Tuesday, September the 11th. I'm sure that Norma didn't know what was going to happen because she died that day, right? But how she instructed me in the voicemail was to drop these documents off the office, that there was a global conference call going on, that the director of that conference call was the person at Marsh to whom I directly asked, what is this money and why is it being miscounted, or what's going on here? And he told me, don't worry about it, right? So this guy is running a meeting, and all the Marsh & McLennan World offices, Australia, London, Asia Pacific, all these offices are on the phone at the same time. Now, to my understanding, they had conducted these calls, not regularly, but they did these calls all the time. They run a world, global business, so they do this. And those calls sometimes started at 6:30 in the morning to accommodate a global audience, and then they went through, late morning, almost to lunch sometimes, depending on, what groups and what projects and, all sorts of different variables. But the point is that people had to be at work specifically early that day to be on this call. And so all the Marsh employees are in this office, and during the break of this meeting, I'm supposed to show up and just drop off the folder, and then the employees who are going to get fired could confront the guy, the Marsh executive, who would seem to me to be kind of behind the funny business with the money. So I'm supposed to take the documents and drop them off the next day. Nothing seems suspicious to me. I got a call back from the person I called. She responded in a way that I was expecting, and at the time I didn't realize, but after you think about why things happened the way they did, Norma Taddy had become the executive administrative assistant for the new executive who had come into Marsh, the same guy I had gone to and said, look, what's with this money? Why are there millions of dollars being billed and we're not doing that much work? We might have done $2 million this month, but we're billing you $5 million. And we're a small company. $1 million was our biggest deal until we dealt with Marsh & McLennan. And then all of a sudden we're billing them millions of dollars a month legitimately, because we've got 50 people there building their Marsh.com infrastructure to accentuate their relationships with their biggest clients, which are the